Majora's Mask, Chapter 64, Beneath the Well. Tattle kept flexing her fingers, relieved. Her scorched arm was much smoother beneath the new layer of cool green gel. The itching was annoying, but it was far better than the searing burn. Tattle and Link stepped out of Pamela's house into a world that was still dark. The sky had brightened only barely. The third-day sun was still an hour from rising. The bitter wind had finally abated, and the tendrils of smoke rising from the charred shacks were gone. The stream, the wheel, and the colorful home's music were constants, however, as was the blackened clay on the blank landscape before them. Thankfully, Link's mood had shifted drastically. While his blue eyes were still a little distant, saving Pamela's father had done wonders for his shattered spirit.
He's no longer one wrong word away from a permanent meltdown,
Tattle thought grimly. She still felt uneasy around him, a feeling that she wished would go away. She felt plenty of guilt, too, for not remaining the dauntless cheerleader.
It'll just take time,
she thought.
We'll be back to normal soon enough.
As if any friendship could be considered normal after experiencing so much traumatic slaughter and loss. For now, they had allies, a few hours of sleep, food, and medicine. They needed more of all three, but the brief respite from Pamela's father would have to carry them through the cycle's end.
It's a huge win that I can flap my wings now without them hurting,
Tattle thought, admiring the medicine again. Her arm was still stiff, but the improvement was beyond words. Link stood silently beside her, staring at the distant graves again. The carved names, Epona and Skull Kid, weren't visible from the home's front porch, though the planks of wood were. Tattle considered saying something, but decided against it. Link made the first move, turning away from the graves and walking down the steps into the Ikana battlefield. Tattle narrowed her eyes.
Where are you going, Deku Head?
She looked to the well, where Sharp had told them to go for the castle's secret entrance. Now that they had the gibdo mask, which surely is what Sharp had guided them toward, they should be fully prepared. Link hadn't put it on yet, and she didn't blame him. Transforming into an undead monster would be way more traumatic than a Deku scrub. "We'll head to the well next," Link said, fishing for something in his bag. It had grown larger, but the bulbous center was well designed, with many pockets to make everything easy to carry. He pulled a brown cloth out, which Tattle realized was the Garrow's mask.
Garrow's hood, really.
She didn't have the energy to argue semantics.
You want to summon ghosts?
Tattle asked. No, he replied. Or maybe, remember what Shade said? This mask should call out spirits that need our help. She wouldn't even let us pass until we had it, which means it must have been important. Link donned the hood, and his face instantly turned to darkness with two twinkling lights for eyes.
Yeah, but Shade could have been messing with us,
Tattle said.
She could have been Beldam, or the crone in disguise.
We did accidentally kill her after she invited us into her home. Something tells me we're the untrustworthy ones, not her.
You killed her,
the fairy thought.
Not we.
But she kept that thought to herself. Tattle wouldn't needlessly test Link's newfound happiness over cruel jabs like that.
I guess so,
Tattle said, as Link wandered around the blank landscape.
But we already have the gibdo mask and a secret entrance to the castle. I don't see why we'd...
Master, you cold?
Link and Tattle both spun to see a tall, cloaked person had materialized behind them. Its hood obscured all but two glowing eyes, and it had long, slender legs. More concerning were the two sharp blades protruding from the cloak's sleeves. Tattle watched Link's hand go to his weapon. The dark being, foreboding with its weapons and towering height, flinched.
What are you?
Its voice was raspy and chilling. The dark spirit leapt backward with incredible grace, spinning in a circle and reflecting the young sunlight on its poised blades. Link drew his gilded sword in reply, as a ring of fire erupted out of the dust. The living heat manifested to mark a makeshift arena, closing the three of them in together. Tattle winced in the fire's power. She barely managed to keep her eyes open and see the cloaked spirit of darkness step toward them across the clay. The flames licked at its back and theirs.
Can't you control it with the hood?
Tattle asked. Link did not have time to answer, clearly giving up when he pulled the hood from his face. The Garrow lashed out one slender blade, and Link raised his sword to parry the attack, meeting the second with his shield before it cut his ankles. The spirit withdrew its weapons to strike again, but Link met its double blades every time. Right, left, up, down, the song of steel rang with the house's music. Metal slid against metal as gold shone in the firelight.
He's back,
Tattle thought as she watched the boy duel. Maybe battle was the only thing left in the world that could pull Link from his grief. When the boy met the Garrow's next strike, he slid his ornate blade up along his enemy's steel into the dark cloak where a wrist should be. The spirit wailed, and a shred of fabric came loose. The blade fell too, clattering to the clay as if a hand had been removed. The Garrow futilely raised the second one, but Link knocked it away as well. The spirit fell to its knees, scrambling away as the boy approached him. The beast was cornered, gilded sword pointed at the being's invisible throat.
Regrettable.
The Garrow stammered.
Although my rival, you were spectacular.
Link kept his eyes narrowed, ready to strike down the spirit and all its pride.
I shall take my bow by opening my heart and revealing my wisdom.
The spirit paused, as if taking one final moment to assess their worthiness.
The secret passageway beneath the well cannot be crossed by slaying the undead there. Only they can open the way forward, so befriending them is the only way to the castle.
Tattle raised an eyebrow.
Thank Nehru I wasn't cursed to be a mouthpiece for random information,
she thought.
If I had a blue rupee for every ethereal being who waited around 100 years just to give strangely specific advice...
Belief or disbelief rests with you,
the spirit said.
To die without leaving a corpse. That is the way of us Garrow.
Then it vanished, and the ring of fire with it. Link remained standing in place, his sword now pointed at thin air.
That was intense,
Tattle said, as the hero sheathed his sword.
So, this is what the Garrow are like? For a secret order of spirit ninjas, they talk like middle-aged men who've never left the house. The Stall children were way more my speed. Which side fought for the Ikana royal family again?
The Stall children, Link said. They were knights for the royal family. These ninjas fought against the king, at least according to Captain Kita.
I'm glad the skeletons stood up to them. Can you imagine a world run by edgy ninjas?
We've only met one of the Garrow. Maybe they're not all so dramatic. Tattle considered.
Well, if one of them was waiting around, invisible and ready to strike, I bet there are more. It's weird how both armies in this ancient war are still undead, hanging around and ready to fight. The Stall children tried to kill us too before they asked any questions.
I thought the Stall children were cursed, though, Link said. Maybe they're all fighting against their will. Tattle sighed.
Whatever's going on here is really, really confusing, and I still don't understand how the Skull Kid was responsible for any of it.
Hopefully the castle has some answers for us, Link said. The king is supposed to be there, right? Waiting for us to break the curse? Tattle nodded.
And maybe he'll have answers about this crone too.
Let's hope so. They left the battlefield behind and walked up the ramp near the music box house to the well. Its stone was as brown as the clay with metal rungs reaching into blackness. The hole was rather wide, and the well's wooden ceiling had long been broken and abandoned. A sign was just in front of it.
Empty well,
Tattle read.
Entry prohibited due to ghost sightings.
She paused.
Sounds promising. I guess the ghost sightings are the undead we're supposed to talk to so we can work our way through?
I guess so, Link said, standing at the well's tip and staring into oblivion.
What do you think is down there? Stall children? Gibdos? Garrow? Giant skeletons who were once captains? Ghosts with glowing hands? Shades with fishing rods? What's your guess?
Link didn't answer, and the fairy turned to see a vacant gaze return to his eyes. She recalled the story he told about the well in Kakariko Village.
Is this giving you flashbacks to Hyrule?
What? Link asked.
Remember? You told me about the well in Kakafuku Village, or however you say it, just before the,
She stammered, realizing she wasn't sure how to refer to the battle that got Epona killed.
The carnage of Ikana? Purple fire mayhem? That time you killed the Skull Kid after he killed your horse?
She stopped herself from referring to it at all.
You told me how a monster came out of it.
Link nodded. Yeah, this well reminds me a lot of that one. Only difference is the whole village was on fire there.
Ready for Scary Well Round 2?
Yes, he said. Let's hope we don't end up cursed like Pamela's father. Link's boots landed on hard stone. The underground cave led only into black. The sliver of pale sky was their only reminder of day now far above them. Tattle's orb of light would be their only saving grace.
Did I tell you how excited I am to be in this underground cave filled with undead monsters?
Tattle asked, flickering beside him.
Because I'm really excited about it.
Same here, Link said, mirroring her sarcasm. He reached into his bag for the gibdo mask, carefully holding the mostly rotted face hidden behind white cloth, frozen into wood. No hint of the father was present, but the monster was safely sealed inside.
Are you going to put that on now?
Tattle asked uneasily. I don't know how else I'll talk to gibdos, the boy said. Unlike Deku Scrubs, Gorons, and Zoras, gibdos were completely feral. He didn't know what would happen once he put it on.
Pamela's father was half a hostile creature,
Tattle said.
It invaded his body. Maybe some of his humanity will help you control it.
Link wasn't sure himself, but there was no other option. The other Poe had told him this was the key he needed, and the Garrow said he couldn't fight his way through whatever lay beyond. The captain's hat and Garrow's mask were also options, but he'd likely need all 3 masks to make it through. He took in a deep breath and placed the mask over his face. Link waited with the gibdo mask on. Thin eye slits allowed him to see the faint, glowing light his fairy gave off. However, nothing happened. Or at least, it seemed that way. He still felt the same. His breathing was normal and regular. The only change was the piece of wood on his face. Did something happen? Link asked. Tattle stared at him strangely.
Did you put it on right? The same way as all the others?
How many ways can you put on a mask? Link asked, removing the piece of wood. It doesn't do anything.
That's anticlimactic. We had a sappy sob story and everything. Shouldn't that have been the 4th transformation mask?
I guess not, Link said, smiling despite it all. He was relieved to avoid stumbling around as an undead monster.
This is, what, our 3rd mask since we've gotten to the canyon? And not one of them has done anything to you? If we get another mask in Ikana that doesn't transform you, I'll feel cheated.
Tattle sighed, shaking her head. Hey, you're not the one whose body is constantly changing, Link said. I'm excited about this. Ikana owes us one good thing. He paused. Hopefully it still does something, though, even if it doesn't transform me.
It makes you look even uglier.
Link didn't humor that joke with a response. I think we should keep going. Maybe we just haven't discovered what the mask does yet.
That's awfully optimistic of you.
Optimistic? The boy thought. Nothing felt further from the truth. He heard his horse's shrill scream again, but he quickly pushed it from his mind as he passed into darkness with his fairy. His footsteps echoed, and he thought he heard water dripping in the distance. It was hard to see much in Tattle's limited light, but the ceiling appeared high and ridged above them. The walls were dirt and rock, continuing on either side. The air cooled, and their line of sight diminished the further they walked. The cave seemed to go even deeper underground. I'm having flashbacks to the Snowhead Cave, too, Link whispered to Tattle. It was too far away to see the path's edges, forcing him to be quiet. Something could be following them, and they would never know. He expected the pale gray silhouette of a monster at every turn. Tattle tensed at the mention of Snowhead.
At least we're doing it together this time.
Eventually, they saw a flickering light ahead. It grew, revealing 2 wooden torches that flanked what Link had been dreading, the outline of a person. The cave boxed itself off into a proper room. Water dripped from the ceiling into a large puddle nearby. The passageway forced them into one direction, the silhouette by the torches. They heard moaning first. Its long, drawn-out voice was ancient and bestial, the underground room soaked in its haunting melody. The gibdo was like any other, standing before a barred door like a guard. The creature was coated head to toe in white cloth. Only spots of rotted flesh poked through. The tall monster rocked on the ball of its heels, moaning as it remained in place. The bars over the door were formidable, likely impervious to steel. Link and Tattle reached the room's center and stopped. The gibdo was still far away against the distant wall. Link cautiously slipped the gibdo mask over his face.
It doesn't seem very happy,
Tattle said. The noises it made were loud, even though all it did was stand there.
Aren't you going to pull out your sword?
The fairy asked, as the heat of the torches washed over his wooden mask, warming his cheeks. Link took her advice. Steel scraped against leather as he armed himself. The gibdo drew its moans out exaggeratedly, as if rattling its throat to make as much noise as possible.
Wait a minute,
Tattle said, as she followed alongside Link.
Is it saying something?
Link stopped to listen closer. The long wailing actually formed a word.
Leave it! Leave it!
The boy closed the last of the space between them and lowered his sword. The monster was trembling in place. Nothing vicious. It stared down at the boy with its shoulders uncomfortably hunched.
Leave it?
Tattle said, daring to join Link in front of the beast.
Is it talking? Link, it's talking to you.
I guess this mask isn't useless after all, Link thought.
Leave it! Leave it!
The frightening voice filled the dark room.
Leave me something deliciously fresh.
Link wasn't sure he'd heard that right.
Deliciously fresh?
Tattle asked.
You want something deliciously fresh?
Leave it! Leave it!
Did you hear that, Deku Head? He wants something deliciously fresh.
If you don't have it,
The gibdo continued.
I have no need for you. Away!
The undead creature thrust out its arms to send them off, and Link and Tattle stumbled backward. The boy uncertainly returned to the middle of the room.
Are you kidding me?
Tattle said, eyes wide.
Deliciously fresh. Link, tell me you have something really tasty in that bag of yours.
I have some stale bread, Link said.
Are we really about to feed that gibdo?
The Garo said we couldn't fight them. Maybe giving it what it wants is the solution. Link walked up to the gibdo again, mask still donned, and bread now in hand.
Leave it. Leave it.
Link began, but he coughed, clearing his throat as he prepared to mimic the creature. I have some bread for you. The boy held out the stale eighth of a loaf, and the gibdo bent down, bringing its rotted face close.
No!
The gibdo shrieked, smacking Link's hand away. The bread toppled to the floor, only for the undead being to start swaying again.
Foulness! Foulness! Away!
Link rejoined his fairy again, who still floated there in disbelief.
This isn't happening,
Tattle stated. I think it is, Link replied, smiling despite it all.
These gibdos are ridiculous. Underneath their hunger for human flesh, rotting skin, and deadly gaze are, what, foodies? On the lookout for the newest Michelin rupee restaurants?
Foodies? Link said, laughing.
Well, what else? Why would it ask for delicious freshness? And apparently they're music critics too, or else they wouldn't wriggle into the ground away from the music box house.
Well, I don't think we have a choice but to listen. I'm trusting the Garo that killing the gibdo is a bad idea. Tattle scoffed.
Where are we going to find something deliciously fresh in Ikana Canyon? There's nothing fresh here. Everything is either dead, undead, or dusty.
The water didn't stop dripping behind them. Instinct told Link to finally listen to the hint, and he approached the large puddle in the back of the room. Tattle noticed where he was heading.
Does water count as delicious freshness?
Link bent down to peer into its murky depths. The torch's light was on his back, but he still had enough to see within. A fish swam in circles through the cloudy puddle, unbothered by the human looking inside. It was rather pale, a sickly white matching the color of its milky eyes.
Fish can be delicious,
Link said.
Ugh, yes.
Tattle grimaced.
Especially when they're freakish, bony cave dwellers living in a puddle of dirt and rock.
He heard her twinkling as she looked around.
Where did it come from anyways?
Link didn't care to answer that question and retrieved one of the 3 bottles in his bag. This one was empty, its water depleted long ago. He removed the cork and dipped it into the puddle, coaxing the fish inside. Soon it was sealed within, and Link jumped to his feet. Tattle looked skeptical.
You really think Mr. Fine Dining will go for your cave fish?
Let's find out,
Link said, approaching the gibdo again.
Leave it! Leave it!
Link held out the bottled fish where he reached the undead guard. The gibdo brought its rotted, fleshy face to the glass. The fish within swam in frantic circles, terrified of the monster.
Ah!
The gibdo exclaimed, now seeming to tremble with excitement. An electric wave of energy spread to its legs, becoming a jittery dance.
This!
The gibdo swiped the bottle out of Link's hands, using its other hand to pull down the strap of cloth over its mouth. Pale, spotted, and green lips revealed themselves, parting as the gibdo opened the bottle and slipped the fish into its decaying throat. It tossed the bottle to the ground, which shattered. It turned to Link, its dance of excitement now over.
I bear you no remorse.
Then the gibdo lurched, hands going to its chest as if stuck. The undead creature collapsed, now lying motionless between the 2 torches. The bar sealing the door slid upward, unlocking the way forward. For the longest time, Link and Tattle stared at the now dead monster. The flames kept dancing, flickering over the lifeless body.
Link?
Tattle said.
Yeah?
Never mind. I won't dignify what just happened with a response.
The shadow waited until the sound of footsteps vanished.
They're restless,
It thought.
even though the boy has saved them.
It had seen the man and her daughter. It had seen the boy and his fairy. They'd all been out here at one point, championing the lift of some curse. Its red eyes had merely watched without a word, without a sound, waiting and observing. Dark Link saw all. The shadow finally stirred from beneath the wooden steps of the music box house. Its skin, tunic, hat, hair, and weapons remained as dark as a featureless nighttime sky, even as the sun crept back to the world.
Wait, watch, follow, and listen.
The words of Majora still rang in the Dark One's head.
I will obey. I must obey.
The battlefield atop the cliff remained blank and scarred. Burnt shells of shacks littered the yard. The music box's tune had long faded to the background.
I saw it all.
The imp was dead, slain by a power Dark Link once controlled. The foolish child had finally paid the ultimate price for stealing it away. All Majora had to do was will the Skull Kid to die, and it had happened. That was true power.
Now it's my job to kill the boy.
Dark Link stepped out from beneath the wooden steps, its dark boots soft and silent on the clay. Murdering this heretic of flesh and light would be easy. The harder task would be finding this magical tree. Majora had revealed the ultimate objective, burning the source of all light magic to the ground.
But how to find it?
The boy and his fairy were bound to come across some hint or clue regarding its whereabouts.
The light calls them. An abomination will draw them to it.
Dark Link would have to find a balance between patience, waiting to see if the boy and fairy finally discovered the Tree of Light, and prudence, killing them to fulfill Majora's demands. The red-eyed demon turned to look at the horizon, which was purpling with the third day. Dark Link turned to the well.
Wait, watch, follow, and listen.
The killer's red eyes never wavered.
Leave it, leave it. Leave me 10 refreshing blasts.
Why the 10 can't you be more specific?
Tattle asked.
If you don't have it, I have no need for you. Away!
The gibdo continued moaning as it shoved them away. The boy stumbled backward, rejected yet again. The undead creature in white cloth remained standing in front of the barred door, unimpressed with Tattle's sarcasm or his own lack of refreshing blasts. This underground room was dark and box-shaped as all the others, though it lacked torches. Her ball of light was minuscule in comparison. The cave system had proved elaborate. Many underground chambers connected with hallways that led to dead ends, or at least dead ends to them, since they couldn't produce what the gibdos needed. They'd only been successful so far with the first one.
I mean, 10 refreshing blasts?
Tattle said.
How vague can you get?
Link sighed, turning to go back down the hallway they'd come through. Some of the halls had been lined with easily avoided booby tracks. Tattle's light was the only reason he wasn't currently dead and impaled, though, and they'd made a mistake eventually. So far, they'd been underground for at least 2 hours.
Hopefully we're closer to being underneath the castle,
the boy thought.
Remember what the last one said?
Link asked.
Something delicious to chomp on. Something that sprouts when it's watered, preferably 5 of them.
Yeah, and that specificity helped us figure out what that one needed,
Tattle said, as they retraced their steps hoping for another path.
It's too bad your spare magic beans got burnt up when you saved me.
I never had 5 of them, though,
Link replied.
I don't understand what a gibdo would want with those anyways. Or something rich in calcium. Seriously, why does a gibdo need milk? Especially if it's just going to die right after we give it to him.
One last taste of something good before he leaves this world?
Link theorized.
I mean, maybe, but there's no way you can explain why those bars open up when the gibdos die.
Maybe their souls are bound to them,
Link said.
Which would make sense, especially if they're guarding a secret route to the castle.
The fairy seemed unamused.
Well, 10 refreshing blasts? There's no way you're explaining that one, unless that gibdo wanted 10 bombs to the face. I can't imagine why a king would protect his secret passageway with dead guards who had explosion fetishes. Lighting 10 bombs down here wouldn't have ended well for us.
Soon, they backtracked to a familiar intersection in the underground darkness. There was only one way left to check.
And if that's a dead end too, then we'll truly be stuck,
Link thought. Tattle's light revealed a low ceiling and narrow passageway, same as everywhere else they'd been.
Ready for creepy hallway number 9?
Link answered by walking that way. His soft footsteps echoed off the rock, but soon another sound interjected, metallic, rhythmic, and violent. Moments of silence were interrupted by the sound of steel scraping against rock. Tattle furrowed her brow.
Some kind of machine?
She flew ahead, illuminating a trap that was not subtle at all. 5 poles ran from ceiling to floor or wall to wall, and sharp spikes ran the entirety of each one. They spun, all while moving up and down and side to side into the walls, floor, and ceiling. They were staggered, one after another, blocking the way forward completely. They were timed to leave only brief windows to pass by unharmed, but they were not synchronized, making the chance of survival slim.
Oh, Nehru.
Tattle exhaled.
I won't even be able to fly past this one.
The fairy would need to time her flying just like his rolling and sidling.
Maybe we should consider this another dead end.
But this one's not impossible to pass. We just have to time it right.
That's a pretty big if.
Well, this is the last way forward,
Link said.
If we turn back, then we'll be leaving the well for good.
That's sounding like the best option, to be honest. This place is absurd, scary, and dark. It's been amusing once or twice, but I'm over it now.
Link frowned.
This is the only way to Ikana Castle.
I know, Deku Head.
Tattle said.
I just can't help but be the voice of reason anyways. Better trapped and stuck than dead and ripped to pieces in this hallway. Anything we need to do to prepare?
Link said, stammering. Just study the pattern the best you can.
Right. Well, see you on the other side, Mr. Hero.
The fairy flew right for the spiked poles.
Wait!
Link called out, and for the first time in their entire adventure, he knew how she'd felt on countless occasions. Tattle, for better or worse, was the first to dive headfirst into danger. His stomach sank, for a moment convinced this was somehow his fault. Ikana had finally broken her just as much as him. Tattle avoided the first pole easily. It slammed into the right wall with an empty clank. The second came from the ceiling unexpectedly, but Tattle stopped just in time. It fell right past her face into the ground. She flew quickly over it, dodging the third and fourth too. The fifth caught her by surprise. Link heard her scream, and he feared her jolt was the spike catching her wing and pinning her to the wall. But she spun away before that could happen. She was safely on the other side, and the final pole hit the wall without a victim. Tattle's shocked expression slowly devolved into a wicked smile.
Come on, Link. You can't let the fairy beat you.
Link gulped as he watched the poles.
You've dealt with these types of things before,
he thought. But they were never easy.
I wish I could activate my scar and just blast through this trap,
he thought. It was aggravating to have such raw power trapped within him, but inaccessible and unpredictable. Even in the madness of that moment when Epona died, and he became a puppet, he'd felt light somewhere deep within him.
A chance to control it. A chance to become the fierce deity without losing my mind.
But then he remembered the Skull Kid's burning body, and Tattle's arm.
I'm coming,
Link said, pushing the thoughts away. Those memories were dangerous territory, and wishing he could control his scar did not make it so. He took a deep breath and charged past the first pole. He rolled past the second as it went up. The third came at him from the side, but he got to his feet and sidestepped it, already bending to roll away from the next one. He successfully avoided it, jumping to his feet to hop over the last. He heard fabric tear, and Link's mind went blank with terror. His bag had ripped open. A spike caught the leather just as he dodged it, ripping open a large hole as it pulled the bag into the wall. The strap, still on Link's shoulder, jerked him backward into the traps. He gasped. His face was suddenly beneath the fourth pole, which already fell to meet him. Link's breath left him as instinct took over. His arm wriggled out of the strap, and he rolled away from the pole. As his bag ripped open, he heard wood and metal spill onto the rock. The sound of his belongings being ground to dust. Tattle screamed. Link was underneath the fifth pole now, but he let gravity carry him forward, falling onto his face and rolling at the same time. The last pole only managed to blow the hat from his head, barely missing his skull. The boy stopped safely on the other side, sporting only a new bruise and cut on his cheek. But the danger wasn't over.
Link, your masks!
The boy jumped to his feet, ignoring the pain as he ran back to the poles. His bag was still caught on the fourth one, hanging limply from the spike as it crashed into the wall repeatedly. His possessions kept spilling out. Underneath various poles and spikes, he saw the splintered remains of Romani's mask, black and white paint now indistinguishable from trash. Some of his masks were safely between poles and out of harm's way, but more possessions kept falling out as the spike tore an even larger hole. The pile of masks, bottles, and weapons was unstable. More of his belongings were pushed closer to destruction every second. When the hookshot fell out, chaos ensued. It landed on the pile of masks, scattering them. The hookshot also landed on its button. Its chain zipped out in reply, narrowly missing Tattle as it struck the far wall behind her. When the chain tried to return the hookshot, a pole pinned one of its links to the ground, and when both ends flew to meet each other, it ripped the spike off and bent the entire fourth pole in half, snapping it. The hookshot spun into the room with Link and Tattle, and the rest of his possessions fell victim to chance. 3 masks spun into the safe room with him. Odalwa's, Goat's, and Georg's. They'd all been bundled together and thankfully been hit in the right way. The most important ones, Link thought, unsure if all their progress would have been erased. He scooped them further into safety as everything else was either crushed, pushed, or split in half. He managed to grab the Deku mask just before the spike ripped it in two. There was another crunch, and the stone mask exploded. Link's bow and lens of truth were safely where the fourth pole had once been, and many rupees now glittered in the darkness, scattered every which way. His quiver of arrows had been destroyed, and the ice axes were too far away to ever be safely retrieved. His 2 remaining bottles had rolled to the other side miraculously, and thank the gods he kept his ocarina on his belt. Link dove back into the traps to salvage what he could. He saw the Zora mask and swiped it under his arm, grabbing his bow too as he rolled away from the 5th pole. Along the way, he kicked as many items as he could back into the room with him. He saw a blur of fabric as he dodged the last of the spikes. At first, he thought it was his bag, but he recognized the remnants of the Garrow's mask. At some point, it had become latched to a spike and ripped to pieces like so much else. Link managed to kick a final mask out of the way as he returned to safety. But he slipped. Link stumbled, managing to keep everything in his arms, but the mask beneath his foot slid the wrong way, back beneath a spike. He turned back just in time to see Darmani's face. No! A spike drove through the Goron mask, and it splintered into shards of wood. The innocent black eyes and round brown face were eradicated. Link sat in shock, watching as the metal poles continued their dance. The boy sat there for a long time, staring at the poles that kept crashing into his walls, his surviving possessions surrounding him in a pile, scattered but safe. Link's former bag still hung limply from a spike, as did the Garrow's hood. Wood splinters, arrows, and his quiver remained trapped and crushed. The fairy watched too, floating beside him in shock.
It's going to be okay, you know?
Tattle said finally. Yeah, Link said glumly. Pain swelled within his chest, all too familiar. The difference between grief, anger, and injury all blurred together. It feels like someone died. Darmani. His spirit was trapped in there.
Darmani died before you met him?
Tattle said. Technically, she hadn't been there for that part of the journey, but she'd gotten Link's recap.
The only thing you lost was a really cool and useful power.
The most useful one, Link said. Darmani broke all my falls and carried heavy things. He could handle more than any of the other forms put together.
Well, now's not the time to pout over a lost toy, Link.
Link's blue eyes turned icy. Don't be cruel. It wasn't just a toy. It was another person who I created with Darmani's memories.
You're reading too much into what that mask was,
Tattle said.
Darmani is a stranger who died before you ever met him. The mask he left behind doesn't get more sympathy than my arm.
Link froze. Rage paralyzed him for a moment, but its foundations proved fragile. It fell away to numbness again, but the boy kept staring ahead instead of meeting Tattle's eyes. You're right. I survived, and so did the masks for the giants. That's what matters. There was a moment of silence. Link sat in it, unsure how to move forward. He could see Tattle more animated in his peripheral.
Link, I'm sorry,
she said finally.
I didn't mean that.
But what you said is true.
Sympathy isn't a contest, and Darmani meant a lot to you. I won't pretend I know what it means to create a whole new person with someone else's memory.
Link did not reply.
We've both got a lot bottled up right now, and no time to deal with it because we're saving Termina,
Tattle said.
I should think more before I speak.
I think you already do that, Link said. I think you already hold back a lot of your feelings. I'm always the one moping or getting excited or needing a pep talk.
And I'm always the one exploding and getting angry. I shouldn't have said what I said, and I didn't mean it.
Link turned over those words. There's more to be said, but not right now.
Let's just get out of this well.
He stood, pausing before he did anything else.
But thank you for saying that.
He gave one last look to the splintered remains of Dormani.
I'm sorry,
he thought, but did not say aloud.
I failed you, too.
Tattle gave him a weak smile before turning to his pile of possessions.
Any thought on what to do without a bag?
Link had managed to save the Deku, Zora, and Gibdo masks, as well as the Mask of Truth and the Captain's hat. 4 masks, his matches, his arrows, his quiver, and all his money were gone. They'd also have to find a way to carry the Lens of Truth, hookshot, bow, the blue potion vial, and the bottles. He winced at the thought of losing the stone mask, too. Invisibility was a useful power they'd never truly taken advantage of.
You'll have to help,
Link said.
But we won't take what we don't need.
Surely we'll come across another bag in the castle.
In the meantime, let's make do.
And so they did. Link put the string of his dark bow over his shoulder and carried the 8 masks in his arms, with the hookshot's handle over his right wrist like a bracelet. The wooden shard from the clock tower doors was safely in the other pocket on his belt, where it had always been. Tattle carried the Lens of Truth and one of the bottles, with a vial of blue potion remnants inside. Opening the door onward was a tedious process, but thankfully, there was no gibdo blocking the way. With only 1 bottle and the destroyed items left behind, they managed to carry the essentials.
And now we're adventuring mules,
the boy thought.
I have to say,
Tattle said, as the door slid shut behind them and Link gathered the masks and hookshot back together.
If a boy and fairy weren't intimidating before, we'll really make monsters think twice now.
Any creature would see them coming from miles away, hobbling with so much stuff in their arms. Link walked slowly and tried not to drop his masks or his hookshot. Tattle had gotten the better end of the deal. She peered through the Lens of Truth as she flew, fascinated by the often forgotten item. The next hallway was dark and narrow, like all the others. Eventually, they approached something new in the distance, and it wasn't a monster, trap, twist, or turn. It was light.
Oh, thank Nehru! Thank Feyror! Thank Din! Thank all the gods who usually hate us! It's the way out!
The last room was large and square like many of the others, but it had no gibdos and a window high up near the ceiling. Sunlight slanted onto the floor's center, illuminating everything. The room had an opening on the left wall filled with suits, weapons, and shelves, implying this had been an armory. Across from it, there was a door, only it was barred and with no gibdo in sight. Link spotted what looked like a small painting on the wall. It appeared to be a sun. The small round decoration was yellow, with wavy lines stretching outward. It had downcast eyes that were rather dull, and the window's sunlight just missed it.
I've seen those before,
Link said, looking to the armory next.
The sun?
Tattle said, looking at it closely. It seemed attached to the wall, as if a device rather than a painting.
Does it do something?
It does, if you have the right item.
Link dropped his masks and the hookshot, sliding the bow from his shoulders. He walked into the large, open closet, sifting through the many objects. Tattle joined him as clouds of dust rose from the ancient belongings.
Is it a good idea to get something new to carry?
Tattle asked. She spotted a damaged saddle in one corner of the closet, and the strap of what could have been a bag beneath it.
Ooh!
She flew that way and pulled it out. It was ugly, gray, and awkwardly long, clearly meant to be a saddlebag, but it was better than carrying everything in their arms. She turned to announce her discovery, but Link directed their attention to something else in his hands.
A shield?
She asked.
A mirror shield,
Link said. It was slightly larger than the one on his back, and its front was silver and spotless, despite the dust and dirt plaguing everything else. The shiny, clear surface felt almost hypnotic to the hero.
There's something magical about it,
Link thought.
Just like the one in Hyrule.
The boy and the fairy's expressions both stared back at them from the magical reflection. A carving of 2 black eyes and a wide, shocked mouth were barely visible, an imprint within the reflection. The shield's edges were brown, and it appeared far more sturdy than the Hylian one.
You've seen one before,
Tattle asked. Watching as sunlight bounced brilliantly off it, the shield appeared to reflect the light perfectly and wholly.
I owned one, the boy said. I found it in future Hyrule in the Desert Spirit Temple, but I never got to bring it back to the present with me.
A shame,
Tattle commented. Link noted the light coming from the window, and then to the sun on the wall. He walked to where the light hit the floor, bending so the sun hit the mirror shield extended before him. The light bounced off brilliantly, and Tattle winced in the brightness. The decorative sun became bathed in the real sun's warmth. The lines surrounding it danced with the now smiling face. Then, the bars covering the door slid up to open the way forward. Link lowered his shield and the fake sun deadened, but the way forward remained unlocked.
Whoa!
Tattle said.
This room ended up being a jackpot. The way out, a new toy, and a bag.
I'm not sure if that bag will fit everything,
Link said, eyeing it.
Let's find out.
The masks and everything did fit, but only barely. The hero slung it over his shoulders to find it heavier and bulkier than the other one.
It'll have to be temporary,
he thought. It was a rectangular burden, but not nearly as cumbersome as carrying everything.
Think you can manage?
Tattle asked.
Yeah.
His stomach lurched when he realized what was about to come next. Link slid the Hylian shield off his back once the bag was situated, holding it uncertainly. Then, he lay it on the floor, and put the mirror shield in its place, over his scabbard. It fit just as well, clear silver in the place of a Hylian blacksmith's painting. He felt sadness bubble within him, but he pushed it down.
We've both got a lot bottled up right now, and
Tattle had said earlier.
And no time to deal with it because we're saving Termina.
He couldn't cry over his shield. There were enough dead people on his conscience to make that meaningless. Link swallowed whatever child's nostalgia tethered him to the Hylian relic.
Wait,
Tattle said, shaking her head.
Are you really gonna leave that here?
It's not as useful,
Link said in monotone.
The mirror shield will be handy in the castle, I bet, and we can't carry what we don't need.
But it's your shield,
Tattle said, looking down at it sadly.
It's one of the only things you have from your home. You're gonna leave it here?
Yes, just like we're leaving Darmani behind and not crying over that.
Tattle scoffed.
Link, I said I was sorry for what I said earlier.
Don't worry about it,
Link said, interrupting her.
I've made up my mind.
He watched Tattle carefully, as if daring her to speak. Tattle looked back at him, worry etched into the wrinkles beside her eyes. He saw so many thoughts race in her mind, but she shared none of them. Her worry dissolved slowly into resolution, mirroring his own.
You're right,
she said eventually.
It'd be silly to bring it with us.
She flew to join Link, without looking back at the lonely possession.
Come on, let's go.
The boy slid the door open, and they passed through to the other side. The Hylian shield remained by itself in the room's center. A shaft of sunlight bathed it in warmth, but already it collected the dust of ages lost long ago.